In this video, I'm going to talk about miking your audience for your live stream audio mix. Hello, I'm Stephen Ballast. Welcome to my channel where I explore worship technology solutions. One of the things I've discovered about live streaming is that good audio is just as important, if not more important than video quality, when it comes to creating a good user experience for your viewers. And in getting your audio right, a good crowd or audience sound can make a big difference. It helps create a sound that feels more like you're in the room with the people experiencing the event. Also, it opens it up, makes it sound more natural, and helps with that direct harshness that's usually associated with taking a feed straight from your front of house mixer. Let's listen to a quick example of what I'm talking about, and then we'll get into some of the specifics. These are multi-tracks recorded from our stage and using virtual soundcheck mixed back through our live streaming mixer. Here it is first without the crowd mics.
I can hear all God's children singing out, we will not be overtaken, we will not be overcome.
It's not a bad mix, it's not great either, but listen to how it's taken to another level when I add in the crowd mics.
Down this dark and painful road I can face every fear of the unknown. I can hear all God's children singing out, we will not be overtaken, we will not be overcome.
I've been working on our crowd sound in this video for a while. I don't think it's gotten quite to where I want it to be yet, partly because I just don't have the budget right now to go out and purchase a bunch of crowd mics. So I've mainly been experimenting with what I have on hand. But it has improved over where we were a year ago, doing a few specific things that I'll share with you. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all solution that is just going to sound amazing for everyone. Use this mic, put it here, and be done. There's just too wide a range of different environments and variables that you can run into. I do think there are some general principles that can be applied to any situation to help you figure out how to get a good crowd sound from your room. So consider this more of a come along and learn a few things with me as I work on our audience miking. First of all, let's state what we are trying to do. We want to mic the room, giving a sense of the audience's involvement, really to hear them singing. We can also use the room mics to give the live stream some of the benefits of the room, like reflections and reverb that occur naturally in the room. While doing that, one of our goals is also to avoid the sound coming from the PA as much as possible, which can be a challenge, especially in a room with a big sound system that's putting out a lot of sound. And also in my case, I have a lot of limitations on where I can put mics just for aesthetic reasons. I'd love to line the front of my stage with shotgun mics, but that's just not going to be accepted in our environment. Let's solo my crowd mics, and I'll talk you through what I've come up with. I'm mixing here in Reaper, which is a DAW that we use live to mix our live streaming audio. This mixer is just being used as a control surface for the DAW. I've got a couple videos about the nuts and bolts of how this is set up if you want to learn more about live mixing in a DAW. Those will be linked down in the description of this video. All my crowd mics feed into this bus called AR for audience response. So here's what all the mics sound like together, and I'll talk about the processing that I have on this bus in a minute as well. These 8 yellow channels here are my crowd mics and are being routed to the AR bus. So let's go through them one at a time. These first 2 mics are Rode NT5s that I have placed on the side of our choir loft, facing the side sections of our audience. This is as close as I can get to a mic at the front of the stage facing the audience. This is the location that I've experimented with the most to try and find a mic that would pick up the audience well in that position. For some reason, the NT5 seemed to shine here. I have a theory about why it sounded more natural in that position I'll share with you, but I might be completely wrong. If you look at the polar pattern for a few of the mics that I tried, most of them have varying frequency responses off-axis. What that means is that the sound that is coming off-axis from the sides is going to have a different tonality than what's coming from the front. If you look at the polar pattern from the NT5, it seems to show that all frequencies roll off pretty evenly as you go off-axis. This spot I have the mic in is a tricky location because it's right on the edge of our PA's coverage, so there's a lot of sound happening there, and I think it's this even roll-off of frequencies that are off-axis that helps it sound more natural than the other mics I tried. So that's my theory. I may be wrong, but the NT5 is working well for me in that position. Next, I have two Audio-Technica choir mics that are hanging over the audience. I installed these 8 years ago when I first started live streaming just our audio, and recently when we installed a new sound system and the mics ended up being right in front of the speaker hang, I thought for sure they would get too much PA in the back, but they actually rejected sound from the back really well. So I was surprised they picked up a decent amount of the audience singing. You'll notice that I have all these mics in pairs, and that each pair is panned hard left and right. This helps keep them out of the way of the rest of the mix, which is going to have a lot of content right up the middle, and gives a nice sense of space to the sound as well. Next, I've got a pair of mics at the front of house sound booth. Right now I'm using a pair of behringer omnidirectional measurement microphones, the ECM 8000. I used it mainly because it was the only pair of omnidirectional mics I had to try out. I was actually pleasantly surprised with what they added to the sound. Being at the back of the room, an omnidirectional mic is working well for me here to add a bit of the natural room sound, and they're really close to people, so I don't have to turn up the gain very high on these, and I get some nice distinct voices that when mixed in with everything else sounds nice. Finally, my last pair of mics. Some might say I'm cheating, but I'm using a pair of our choir mics. These again give some nice distinct voice sounds. I don't use this third choir mic here because it's right over our drums, and I'm already getting a lot of bleed from the drums into the other choir mics, so I just mute that to the AR bus. So let's listen to all those mics combined again into the AR bus, and then with the full band.
His promises are true.
You'll notice that I'm not relying on a single mic or a single pair of mics to give me the whole audience sound. I'm building that sound from a variety of different mics that are adding different things to the overall audience sound. If you just took a pair of mics and cranked up the gain enough to hear a large crowd, what's going to happen is you're going to hear a bunch of your PA instead. Your sound system is going to be louder than the people across the room. So to get the sound of a large crowd, use lots of mics and build up that sound. Now you can't just put all the mics right next to each other though to get the same effect. When I have all these mics right here in one location, that's just for the sake of comparison. I'm only listening to one at a time to see how it compares to what the other mics are hearing from the same location. When you're building your crowd sound, you don't want mics picking up the same thing. That won't sound like a large crowd and will just lead to phasing between your mics. Place your crowd mics around the room to hear distinct, different groups of people. The usual places to try would be mics on stage pointed at the crowd, which may be shotgun mics at intervals around the front of your stage, if that can work in your environment. Mics hanging over the audience is another common position, which choir mics can work great for. And finally, mics positioned near the back of the room. and the sound booth is a convenient location for that. And it's not uncommon to use a variety of mics at the sound booth. Maybe a mic at each corner would work in your room. When you're looking for ways to position your mics, think about the pickup pattern of the microphone and how to hear people with the least amount of PA coming into your mics. You may be saying, well, I don't have 8 channels and 8 microphones available to build up my crowd sound like that. What I would encourage you to do is start somewhere. One mic is still going to sound better than nothing, and even just using a vocal mic like an SM58 is going to sound better than having no crowd mics at all. Okay, now let's take a look at how I have the crowd mics processed. You'll notice that the individual channels have no processing. Up here is where you insert effects in Reaper, like you see over here on the vocals, but the AR mics are all unprocessed. At the channel, I'm just panning the pairs of mics hard left and right, and each channel has the master send turned off and is routed to the AR channel, which is one way to make a bus in Reaper, and that's where I do all of my processing. There are a couple reasons I do all of my processing on the bus. For one, it saves on processing power. I can just use one EQ rather than an EQ on each channel. It's also more efficient. I just have one EQ to adjust to make changes to how my audience sounds. Also, I think it helps all the mics sound like one crowd when they are going through the same processing in the bus. You'll also notice I'm actually doing very little processing. I think in large part because I've found mics that work in the locations they are in. For instance, I felt like I had to do a lot more processing on the shotgun mics when I was using them on stage. Then when I switched to the Rode NT5s, it just worked and didn't need as much EQ to sound right. First, I've got an EQ. I'm using the Waves Renaissance EQ, and I start with a pretty extreme high-pass filter, set between 2 and 300 Hz. Let me take that off a second so you can hear how much low end it's really taking out. We don't want any of that low end muddying things up and smearing things in our mix like the kick drum and bass guitar, so go crazy with your high pass filter. Next, I've notched out a couple frequencies that were just building up a little too washy. At 250, and the same with 500, taking out a little boxiness. It's subtle, but it helps. The frequencies you may need to notch out will most likely be different for your mics and your room. Just take some time to solo your AR bus, and you can use a free spectrum analyzer like Span to help identify some of the frequencies that are causing problems. Next in line is the Waves L2 Ultra Maximizer, which is just a nice way to control gain. As you pull the threshold down, it increases the gain to the ceiling and will start to compress when it hits the ceiling. It helps increase the overall gain to where I want it while knocking down any peaks that may come through. Finally, I've got this Maserati Group plugin. I've been looking for a good use for this plugin, and finally when I put it on my AR bus, it was an aha moment. I use it in the background vocal setting, and it adds a bit of EQ, a bit of compression, and also spreads the stereo field, pushing the audience a little wider. You'll probably need headphones to hear the difference, but it's why I like this plugin on the AR bus. It's subtle, but I like what it adds. So here's the AR bus without any processing, and I'll add in each one at a time. I really like Waves plugins. As you can see, I'm using a lot of them in my mix, and you can use them live if you're mixing in a DAW. I've got a discount code you can use to get 10% off any Waves plugins you purchase. You can find that along with links to some of the mics and other equipment I'm using down in the description of this video. I also have on my website a diagram with links to all the equipment of my recommended live streaming setups for single cameras and multi-camera. So if you're just starting out in live streaming, be sure and check that out. I hope you found this video helpful. Be sure and subscribe to my channel so you can see more of my videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Greater is He